I never thought a single voice message could destroy 25 years of marriage. But that's exactly what happened on that Friday night when my phone buzzed at 11:43 p.m. You know how they say life can change in an instant? Well, I was just finishing up some paperwork in my auto repair shop's office, getting ready to head home, when that notification popped up. Sarah's name, and underneath, a voice message. Nothing unusual about your wife sending you a message, right? I hit play, thinking maybe she needed a ride home from her regular girls' night out with her office friends. The message started with some background noise, typical bar chatter, music, glasses clinking. Then I heard her voice, slightly slurred from what I assumed were those fancy cocktails she'd started favoring lately. "Greg, baby, you're the best, seriously. God, I want you so bad right now." My hand froze on the mouse. Spreadsheet forgotten. "That idiot Tom won't suspect a thing. See you tomorrow? Please don't forget how good last night was." The message ended, just like that. 45 seconds that erased 25 years. I played it again, and again. Each time hoping I'd misheard, that maybe it was some sick joke. But no, it was her voice, my wife's voice, drunk dialing her lover but hitting my contact instead. You'd expect rage, right? Some dramatic explosion of anger? Instead, I felt this strange calm settle over me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe something deeper, this cold, crystallizing clarity. I saved the message, then carefully set my phone down on the desk. The clock on my office wall kept ticking. Outside, I could hear the usual Friday night traffic, people heading home, going out, living their normal lives. But inside my office, something had fundamentally shifted. As I sat there staring at the phone that had just detonated my marriage, a plan started forming in my mind. Sarah had always said I was too predictable, too steady. No romance, she'd complained lately. Well, I was about to show her just how unpredictable I could be. Because sometimes revenge isn't served hot, with screaming and fighting. Sometimes it's best served ice cold, with a smile and a perfectly planned execution. I locked up the shop and drove home, rehearsing how I'd act normal tomorrow when she came back hungover and guilty. After all, I had a party to plan. I spent that night in my office, sleeping on the old leather couch I keep for late work sessions. Sleep wasn't really sleep, though. More like a series of moments where reality kept hitting me in waves. 25 years, 2 kids through college, countless Sunday barbecues, all erased by 45 seconds of drunken truth. The next morning, I watched the sun rise through my office window, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Sarah, probably realizing her drunk dialing mistake. I let them sit there unanswered. Instead, I pulled up our joint bank account on my laptop. The evidence was there, hiding in plain sight. Hotel charges disguised as business lunches, unexplained ATM withdrawals, expensive dinner receipts from days she'd claimed to be working late. The truth had been sitting in our monthly statements, and I'd been too trusting to look. At 9:47 a.m., she sent a text. "Sorry about the weird calls last night. Girls' night got crazy. See you at home. Love you." That heart emoji hit me like a punch to the gut. How many of those had she sent to Greg right after sending them to me? I took a deep breath and typed back. "No problem, honey. Actually planning a surprise for you. Don't make plans for next Saturday." Her response was instant. "Really? What kind of surprise? Haha." "Anniversary celebration," I replied, though our anniversary was months away. "Thinking of having everyone over. Family, friends, your office crew too. Time to show everyone how much I love my wife." "OMG, that's so romantic. So unlike you." Unlike me. Yeah, she had no idea just how unlike me this was going to be. I started making calls, first to our friends, then family, then her coworkers. Everyone was excited about the surprise party. "Tom's finally showing his romantic side," they said, if they only knew. I saved Greg for last. His voice was casual when he answered, but I caught that slight hesitation when I mentioned Sarah. Yeah, man, count me in. Sarah deserves a great party. Sarah deserves something all right, I thought as I hung up. But first I had some more digging to do. Because if you're going to destroy someone's carefully constructed lies, you better make sure you have all the evidence lined up perfectly. The next week was a masterclass in acting. Every morning I'd kiss Sarah goodbye like nothing was wrong. Every evening I'd listen to her stories about busy days at the office while scanning her face for tells. They were everywhere once I started looking. The way her eyes would drift to her phone, how she'd touch her neck when mentioning meetings, those late work sessions that left her wearing fresh perfume. I started keeping a journal of her lies, not for the divorce lawyers, though they'd definitely appreciate it later, but to keep myself sane. Every time she said working late, I'd check her location on our shared phone plan. Funny how many important meetings happened at the Riverside Hotel. You seem different, she said one night over dinner, more attentive. I smiled, cutting into my steak. Just excited about our party? Been thinking about what to say in my speech? Speech? A flash of worry crossed her face. You're giving a speech? Of course. I reached for her hand across the table, watching her try not to flinch. Got to tell everyone how much you mean to me. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her pretend to sleep. Her phone kept lighting up with silent notifications. Greg, probably, wondering if I suspected anything. The temptation to grab her phone and read everything was almost overwhelming, but that would ruin the bigger plan. Instead, I focused on the party preparations. I hired the best caterer in town. Expensive, but worth it for what was coming. Ordered top-shelf champagne for the toasts, even bought a new suit. You're really going all out, our friend said. Sarah's a lucky woman. The RSVPs rolled in, including one from Greg's wife, Emma. Sarah tensed up when I mentioned it. Emma's coming? But she never comes to these things. I insisted, I said. After all, Greg's such a good colleague of yours. Wouldn't be right without his wife there. I watched Sarah send a panicked text under the table, probably warning Greg, let them worry, let them scramble to keep their stories straight. The weight of the voice message on my phone felt heavier every day, like a grenade with its pin half pulled. The day before the party, I caught Sarah and Greg in a heated whisper argument by the office coffee machine. I'd started dropping by her workplace randomly, bringing her lunch or coffee. Just another loving husband gesture that made her squirm. Their faces, when they saw me, almost made me break character. Hope I'm not interrupting, I said, holding up the coffee carrier. Brought your favorite honey, Greg? Grabbed you one too. Sarah's always saying, what a great colleague you are. Greg's hand shook slightly as he took the coffee. Thanks, man. Really thoughtful of you. Yeah, about tomorrow's party, I added casually. Greg, you're still doing that toast, right? Sarah mentioned you're quite the public speaker. Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her mouth. I hadn't asked Greg to give any toast. We all knew it. Greg stammered. Just kidding? I laughed, enjoying their visible relief. But seriously, everyone's going to be there. Your wife Emma's really excited, Greg. Says you two don't get out enough together lately. The look they exchanged was priceless. Worth every penny I'd spent hiring the private investigator who documented their hotel meetups, every hour I'd spent planning this moment. Back home that night, Sarah was unusually quiet, watching me set up chairs for tomorrow's party. Maybe we should keep it small, she suggested. Just family. Honey, I've already got everyone's RSVPs. Besides, I smiled, testing the sound system I'd rented. I want everyone to hear what I have to say about our marriage. She went to bed early, claiming a headache. I stayed up late, reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, the voice message I'd enhanced for better audio quality. Somewhere in the house, I heard her phone buzz with what was probably another panic text to Greg. Tomorrow, I thought, setting up the last chair, tomorrow everyone would hear exactly what kind of marriage we had, and I'd make sure they heard it loud and clear. The guests started arriving at 7. I stood at the door, playing the perfect host, watching Sarah flutter around in her new dress, the one she'd probably bought to impress Greg. She kept glancing at the door between greeting guests, her smile tightening each time it opened. Our house filled with the comfortable chaos of a party, laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. Old friends from the neighborhood, her office colleagues, our families, all the people who'd watched our marriage and thought they knew us. They brought gifts we didn't deserve and congratulations that made my stomach turn. "You two are such an inspiration," Janet from next door gushed, squeezing Sarah's arm. 25 years and still so in love. I caught Sarah's eye across the room. She raised her champagne glass in my direction, playing along perfectly. That's what we'd become, actors in our own lives. Well, the show was about to take an unexpected turn. Greg arrived fashionably late, Emma on his arm. I watched Sarah's face as they walked in, the microscopic flinch, the way her fingers tightened around her glass. Greg had dressed up, looking every bit the successful professional. His wife looked beautiful but tired, probably from all those nights wondering where her husband really was. "Tom," Greg called out too enthusiastically, clapping me on the shoulder. "Man of the hour! Some party you've put together here?" "Wait till you hear my speech," I replied, enjoying how his hand tensed on my shoulder. "Got something special planned." I'd positioned the sound system strategically, speakers in every corner, the main control panel near where I'd be standing for my speech. The audio technician I'd hired had cleaned up that voice message beautifully, removing background noise, making every damning word crystal clear. Sarah kept trying to catch Greg's eye across the room, but he was studiously avoiding her gaze, playing the attentive husband to Emma. I watched their little dance of avoidance, remembering all those late meetings and business dinners they'd shared. My brother Mike pulled me aside at one point. "You okay, Tom? You seem intense." "Never better," I assured him, patting the phone in my pocket. "Just want everything to be perfect." The caterers circulated with appetizers, the bartender kept the drinks flowing, and everyone commented on what a wonderful surprise party this was. If they only knew the real surprise that was coming. I'd timed everything carefully, let them all get comfortable, let them have a few drinks, let Sarah and Greg start to relax, thinking they'd gotten away with it. The weight of the truth sat heavy in my pocket, waiting for its moment. Around 9, I caught the caterer's eye, our prearranged signal. She started encouraging people to find seats, clearing space in front of the main speaker. Sarah was across the room, laughing at something her sister had said. Greg was refilling his drink, his back to her. They had no idea that every casual movement was taking them closer to their last moments of pretense. "Time for the speech," Sarah called out, playing her part to the end. "Almost, honey," I answered, moving toward the sound system. "Just want to make sure everyone can hear this clearly." I stepped up to the makeshift stage area we'd created in our living room, champagne glass in hand. The faces looking up at me were warm with alcohol and anticipation. Friends, family, colleagues, all gathered to celebrate what they thought was a marriage worth honoring. Sarah beamed from her seat in the front row, the perfect picture of an adoring wife. Greg sat 3 rows back, Emma's hand in his, trying to look casual. "First," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Looking around this room, I see the people who've been part of our journey, who've witnessed our love story." I paused, letting my eyes meet Sarah's. "Who've seen what we mean to each other." Sarah raised her glass, playing her role perfectly. If I hadn't heard that message, I might have believed her smile myself. "You know," I continued, "they say marriage is built on trust, on honesty, on those little moments that make up a life together." My hand brushed against my phone in my pocket. And sometimes those moments come when you least expect them. Sometimes they come late at night, when you're working late at your shop, and your phone buzzes with a message. I saw it then, the first flicker of uncertainty in Sarah's eyes. In the back, Greg shifted in his seat, his hand tightening on his drink. "Sarah," I turned to face her directly, "remember last Friday? Your girls' night out?" The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Behind her, I could see Greg starting to stand, then, thinking better of it. "You had quite a night, didn't you, honey?" "Had a few drinks, made a few calls." I reached for my phone, watching her eyes track my movement. "Actually, you made one very special call, one I think everyone here should hear." "Tom," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you—" "It's funny," I cut her off, my voice carrying across the now silent room. "How technology works these days. How easy it is to save a voice message, to enhance it, to make sure every single word comes through crystal clear." The room had gone so quiet you could hear ice shifting in glasses. Every eye was on us, this dramatic scene unfolding in what they'd thought was a simple anniversary party. "Greg," I called out, not looking at him yet, "you might want to move closer. After all, this message was meant for you." I heard Emma's confused, "What?" from somewhere in the back. Saw Sarah's sister grab her arm in shock. Watched my brother Mike straighten up, starting to understand where this was going. "Before I play this," I continued, finger hovering over my phone, "I want everyone to really listen. Because this isn't just a drunk dial. This isn't just a mistake. This is the sound of 25 years of marriage revealing its true face." Sarah stood up suddenly, her chair scraping back. "Tom, please." "Please what, Sarah? Please don't. Please stop." I felt the weight of every eye in the room. "That's funny because I've got a recording here of you saying, 'Please too,' just not to me." The sound system hummed to life as I connected my phone. Sarah's face had gone from pale to ashen. Greg was frozen in his seat, Emma staring at him with dawning horror. The audience that had gathered for a celebration was about to become witnesses to an execution. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my finger over the play button, "I'd like to share with you a very special message from my loving wife." The first notes of background bar noise filled our living room. I watched Sarah's face as she recognized it, saw the exact moment she remembered that night. Her lips formed a silent no as her own voice, thick with alcohol and desire, poured from the speakers. "Greg, baby, you're the best. Seriously." The room erupted in small gasps and murmurs. Emma's sharp intake of breath cut through them like a knife. Greg sat frozen, his face a mask of terror, as Sarah's drunken confession continued. "God, I want you so bad right now. That idiot Tom won't suspect a thing." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Sarah's sister dropped her wine glass, red liquid spreading across our cream carpet like blood. But I kept my eyes locked on Sarah, watching her world collapse in slow motion. "See you tomorrow? Please don't forget how good last night was." The message ended. In the silence that followed, you could hear someone's watch ticking. The air felt electric, charged with shock and horror, and the collective intake of breath from 30 people processing what they'd just heard. Emma moved first. She stood up, hands shaking. "How long?" Her voice cracked as she stared at her husband. Greg couldn't meet her eyes. "How long?" Sarah tried to reach for my arm. "Tom, I can explain." "Explain?" I stepped back, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "Explain what, Sarah?" "Explain how you've been sleeping with him behind my back, behind Emma's back? Explain how you laugh about me being an idiot while you're drinking with your lover?" "It's not. We didn't." Greg finally found his voice, standing up. Emma whirled on him. "Shut up," she screamed. "Just shut up." She turned to Sarah. "We were friends. I trusted you, both of you." The room had divided like the Red Sea. guests backing away from both couples, creating an arena for our private hell made public. I saw phones coming out. Tomorrow, this would be all over town. Sarah's carefully cultivated image as the perfect wife, Greg's reputation as the successful family man, all burning down in real time. "I have more," I announced to the room. "Hotel receipts, bank statements, photos from the private investigator. Would anyone like to see those too?" "Please stop," Sarah whispered, mascara running down her cheeks. "Not like this." "Not like this?" I laughed, and it sounded foreign even to me. "How should it be then, Sarah? Private, quiet, dignified, like the way you handled our marriage?" Greg made a move toward the door. I raised my voice. "Running away, Greg? Like you do from every responsibility. Ask Emma about the credit card bills from the Riverside Hotel. Ask her about all those late meetings you two had." The room swayed with tension, everyone watching this car crash in slow motion, unable to look away. Years of lies were unraveling in minutes, and all I felt was a cold, clean sense of justice being served. The party dissolved into chaos. People started grabbing their coats, muttering awkward goodbyes, practically tripping over each other to escape the blast radius of our imploding marriage. A few stayed behind. My brother Mike, Sarah's sister Rachel, and Emma, who stood shell-shocked in the middle of our living room. "I recorded everything," I told Emma quietly, pulling out a USB drive. "Hotel receipts, photos, bank statements. Your divorce lawyer will find it very helpful." Sarah had collapsed onto the sofa, her perfect party dress wrinkled, her carefully applied makeup streaking down her face. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "Long enough to do this right," I replied, watching Greg pace by the door like a caged animal. "Long enough to make sure everyone knows exactly who you both are." "You didn't have to do it like this," Greg finally spoke up, his voice shaking. "You could have..." "Could have what?" Emma cut in, her voice razor-sharp. "Kept it quiet? Protected your reputation, like I've been doing for years, making excuses for your late meetings?" She turned to me. "Were there others before Sarah?" I nodded, pulling out my phone again. "The investigator found 3 in the last 5 years. Want their names?" Greg's face went from red to white. Emma's laugh was horrible, a broken, bitter sound. Of course there were others, and I was the stupid, trusting wife who believed every lie. "We should talk about this privately," Greg tried again, reaching for Emma's arm. She jerked away like his touch burned. "Private?" I repeated. Like that voice message was supposed to be private, like my marriage was supposed to be private. I turned to Sarah. "How private were those hotel rooms, honey?" "The ones I paid for with our joint account?" Rachel had moved to her sister's side, but her face was hard. "How could you, Sarah?" "Mom and Dad thought the world of Tom." "It wasn't... I didn't mean..." Sarah struggled to find words that could possibly justify this moment. "I just felt so..." "Bored?" I supplied. "Restless? Unsatisfied with your predictable, reliable husband, the one who built that business you were so happy to spend money from, the one who put our kids through college while you were finding excitement with Greg?" Mike stepped forward, his hand on my shoulder. "Maybe we should end this now, Tom. You've made your point." "No," I shook his hand off. "The point isn't made until they feel exactly what I felt, what Emma felt. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of thinking we weren't good enough while they played us for fools." The room fell silent except for Sarah's quiet sobs and the sound of Greg's anxious pacing. Outside I could hear cars starting, carrying away witnesses to our destruction. Tomorrow, phones would buzz with texts and calls, spreading the story across our social circles. Their carefully constructed facades would crumble in real time. Emma moved to the bar and poured herself a straight whiskey, her hands surprisingly steady. "Tell me about the others, Greg. I want to hear every detail, every single lie you told me while Tom's investigator was building his file." Greg's professional facade was cracking. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he looked between his wife and the door. "Emma, please, we can work through this." Like we worked through the last time I suspected something? Emma's voice was arctic. "When you made me feel crazy for questioning those weekend conferences, called me paranoid?" She turned to Sarah. "Was he with you then? Or was that one of the others?" Sarah couldn't meet her eyes. Rachel had moved away from her sister, disgust evident on her face. The perfect family image Sarah had cultivated for decades was dissolving in real time. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, settling into my favorite armchair, like this was just another evening at home. "It's not even the sex, it's the laughing, the plotting, that idiot Tom conversations you must have had. Tell me, did you both laugh about how trusting I was? How I never questioned the late nights, the business trips, the special projects?" "It wasn't like that," Sarah whispered. "I loved you." "Don't." My voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't you dare say you love me while that message exists, while those hotel receipts exist, while Greg's wife stands here learning about all his other affairs." "Other affairs?" Sarah's head snapped up, face pale. "What other affairs?" I laughed, and even I could hear the cruelty in it. "Oh, this is rich. Did you think you were special, Sarah? The only one? Show her the list, Emma. Show her what your husband's been up to while she thought she was his soulmate." Emma pulled out her phone, where she'd been reading the files I'd shared. "Jessica from accounting, 2019. Michelle from the Denver office, 2020. And now my friend Sarah. My friend." Her voice broke on the last word. Sarah turned to Greg, devastation fresh on her face. "You told me I was different. You told me we had something real." "Welcome to reality," I said, watching her world crumble again. "How does it feel to be just another name on his list? Another fool who believed his lines about being unhappy at home? About needing someone who truly understood him?" Mike stepped forward again. "Tom, maybe—" "No, Mike. Let them feel it. All of it." I stood up, walking to the bar. "Let's have a toast. To truth, to consequences, to watching everything you built on lies collapse around you." Greg finally found his spine. "You've had your revenge, Tom. You've destroyed everything. Are you happy now?" "Happy?" I turned to him slowly. "No, Greg, I'm not happy. I'm not anything yet. Because this public humiliation, this is just the beginning. Tomorrow your boss gets an interesting email about company resources being used for your affairs. Your clients learn what kind of man they're trusting their business to. Your children—" "Leave my kids out of this." Greg's face went from red to white. "Like you left my kids out of it when you were sleeping with their mother, when you were helping destroy their family?" I took a slow sip of whiskey. "Actions have consequences, Greg. You're just starting to taste yours." The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, each chime echoing through our now devastated living room. Funny how this same space had held such different emotions just hours ago. Fake happiness, hidden tensions, unspoken lies. Now it was all out in the open, raw and ugly and real. "I need to know everything," Emma said, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. "Every meeting, every lie, every time you made me feel crazy for suspecting." She looked at Sarah. "And you're going to tell me too, every detail, every time you smiled at me knowing you were sleeping with my husband." Sarah had moved to the window, staring out at the empty driveways where our guests had fled. "I never meant—" "It wasn't supposed to become—" "Wasn't supposed to become what?" I interrupted. "A disaster? A public scandal? What exactly was your best-case scenario here, Sarah? That you'd keep fooling your idiot husband forever? That Greg would leave his wife for you?" I smiled coldly. "Oh, wait. You weren't even his only side project, were you?" Greg had loosened his tie, his polished exterior crumbling. "We all made mistakes here." "No," Emma cut him off. "Don't you dare equate our trusting you with your betraying us. Don't you dare try to spread the blame." She turned to me. "The others, Jessica, Michelle, do their husbands know?" "They will by morning," I replied. The same email that's going to Greg's boss is going to their families too, complete with dates, times, hotel records. I looked at Greg. Hope you enjoyed being the office superstar. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Rachel, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke up. Sarah, Mom and Dad, they're going to be devastated. They love Tom like a son. Please, Sarah whispered, turning from the window, please don't tell them. Don't tell them what? I laughed. That their perfect daughter is an adulteress? That she mocked her husband while sleeping with her friend's spouse? Too late. They were here tonight. They heard everything. Or did you miss them leaving? Your mother couldn't even look at you. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. I watched her legs give out as she sank into a chair, the full weight of consequences finally settling on her shoulders. You know what's ironic? I continued, pouring another drink. All those times you complained I wasn't romantic enough, wasn't exciting enough. Well, how's this for excitement, Sarah? Is this enough drama for you? Mike touched my arm. You've won, Tom. Maybe it's time to... To what? I shrugged him off. To be the bigger person? To end this quietly? I gestured around the room. This is just the first act. Tomorrow, their phones will start ringing. Their emails will flood. Their carefully built reputations will burn. And I'm going to watch every second of it. The sound of sirens drifted in from outside, someone's drama elsewhere in the night. But in our living room, the real drama was just beginning to unfold, as 4 lives that had been intertwined for years finally unraveled in the aftermath of a single voice message. The first text message arrived at 12:43 a.m. Sarah's phone lit up with her mother's name, and I watched her face crumple as she read it. Then came another, and another. The digital aftermath of our nuclear evening was beginning. They're all choosing sides already, I said, scrolling through my own messages. Your sister's friends, my business associates, the neighbors. I looked up at Sarah. Funny how fast a reputation can crumble. 25 years of being the perfect wife, destroyed by 45 seconds of drunk honesty. Greg's phone started buzzing too, probably the first waves of tomorrow's tsunami hitting early. He checked it, his face going ashen. The office group chat, he muttered. Someone's already posted about tonight. Welcome to the digital age, I raised my glass. Where scandals travel at the speed of light. How many people are in the chat, Greg? 30? 40? All your colleagues watching your life implode in real time? Emma had been quietly reading through the investigation file I'd given her. The Denver conference, she said suddenly. When Michelle from the Denver office? She looked up at Greg. I called you every night. You told me you missed me. Were you in bed with her while we talked? The silence was answer enough. Emma stood up, walked calmly to the bar, and picked up an expensive bottle of champagne, one of many I'd bought for tonight's celebration. Without a word, she hurled it at Greg. He ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind him, leaving a stain like a Rorschach test on our cream wallpaper. That's coming out of your alimony, Greg snapped, then immediately realized his mistake. Alimony? Emma's laugh was terrible. You think you're getting off that easy? That this ends with just divorce? No, Greg. This ends with everyone knowing exactly who you are. Every client, every colleague, every friend. Sarah had started crying again, silent tears tracking down her face as her phone kept lighting up with messages. Each buzz was another friend, another family member, another connection burning. Tom, she whispered up, please. Make it stop. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Like you told Emma there was nothing going on with Greg, like you told me you were working late. I stood up, walking to the wall of family photos I'd left up for tonight's party. Look at these, Sarah. Look at all these moments you were pretending, all these smiles that meant nothing. I started taking down the photos one by one. Our wedding day, family Christmases, vacation snapshots, each one a documented lie, a moment when she'd been living a double life. The funny thing is, I continued, dropping the frames into a box, I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just fascinated. watching your perfect world burn, watching you realize that actions have consequences. That trust, once broken, can't be glued back together like these cheap frames. Greg's phone rang, his company's CEO, at 1 in the morning. He stared at it like it was a snake about to strike. "Better answer it," I suggested. "Might be your last chance to make excuses before tomorrow's email hits his inbox. The one with all those expense reports showing how company money funded your little adventures." He stepped into the hallway to take the call, but we could still hear his desperate attempts at damage control. "Sir, I can explain." "No, that's not—" "Please, let me—" Emma smiled grimly. "Sounds like someone's perfect career is circling the drain." She turned to Sarah. "Was it worth it? Breaking up 2 families for a man who can't even keep track of which woman he's lying to?" Sarah had stopped crying, moving into that eerie calm that comes after emotional exhaustion. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "I thought I was special." "Oh, you're special all right," I laughed. "Special enough to be part of his pattern. How many others started just like you, Sarah? Office flirtations, late meetings, hotel rooms charged to expense accounts." Greg stormed back in, face mottled with rage. "You bastard! You copied the expense reports? Do you know what you've done?" "Better than you, apparently. I know exactly what I've done." I pulled out my phone. "Want to see tomorrow's email? The one going to every major client in your portfolio, complete with hotel receipts, time-stamped photos, and statements from the private investigator?" "You'll destroy my career." "Like you destroyed my marriage?" I stood up, facing him. "Like you destroyed Emma's trust, your own marriage, your kids' family?" I stepped closer. "Actions have consequences, Greg. You're just not used to facing them." Sarah's phone rang, her boss this time. She looked at me pleadingly. "Go ahead," I gestured. "Explain to him why his company's about to become Gossip Central, why his married senior manager was sleeping with a colleague, why HR's going to have a very interesting Monday morning." She answered with trembling hands. I watched her face crumple as her professional life began unraveling in real time. "The thing about consequences," I continued, addressing the room, "is that they don't just hit once. They keep coming. Tomorrow, it's your jobs. The next day, it's your friends choosing sides. Then your kids start hearing rumors. Your neighbors stop making eye contact. Your church members whisper behind their hands." "You've made your point," Greg growled. "You've had your revenge." "Revenge?" Emma cut in. "This isn't revenge. This is justice. This is consequences. This is what happens when you build a life on lies and finally get caught." Sarah ended her call looking shell-shocked. They're suspending me, pending investigation. Greg, too." "Just the beginning," I nodded. "Wait until they start interviewing your colleagues. All those long lunches, closed-door meetings, business trips, everyone will suddenly remember seeing something suspicious." Rachel, who'd been quietly watching this implosion, finally spoke up. "Sarah, Mom's asking if you're coming to Sunday dinner this week. She says not to bother." That hit Sarah like a physical blow. Sunday dinners at her parents' had been a tradition for decades, another piece of her life crumbling away. "It's fascinating, really," I mused, watching them all process their collapsing realities. How quickly a comfortable life can disintegrate. All it takes is one moment of truth, one drunk voice message, one night when all the lies finally come home to roost. Greg's phone buzzed again. His wife, this time. His actual wife, not Emma. "Your daughter," Emma explained, seeing our questioning looks. I texted her, told her to ask her mother to check her email, the one I just sent with Tom's evidence file. Greg lunged for his phone, but Emma held up her hand. Too late. Way too late. For all of it. The night had taken on a surreal quality, like we were all actors in some twisted play. Sarah sat among the ruins of our family photos, Greg paced like a caged animal, and Emma stood by the window watching the world with new eyes. "You know what's funny?" I said, breaking the heavy silence. "I kept thinking I'd feel better once everyone knew. once your perfect masks were ripped off. But watching you both destroy everything you had, it's not satisfaction, I feel. It's pity. Pity? Greg stopped pacing. You destroyed our lives. No, Emma interrupted. You destroyed your lives. Tom just exposed what was already there. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of deception, that was all you. Both of you. Sarah looked up from the scattered photos. What happens now? Now? I smiled without humor. Now you get to live in the world you created. Every morning you'll wake up and remember what you lost. Every time your phone rings, you'll wonder who else has heard. Every time you see a familiar face, you'll know they know. My phone buzzed. Another message. I checked it and laughed. Oh, this is rich. The country club committee is meeting tomorrow to discuss your memberships. Apparently, they have moral conduct clauses. They can't? Sarah started, then stopped. Of course they could. The same people who'd smiled at her across tennis courts and charity events had heard her drunken confession tonight. Your sister's right, I continued. You won't be welcome at your parents' Sunday dinners. Your mother's bridge club will find a new fourth. Your clients will quietly find other managers. It's amazing how fast a social circle can become a social void. Greg's phone rang again, his daughter this time. He answered, and we all watched as his face crumbled, hearing her reaction to the truth. When he hung up, he looked decades older. She doesn't want to see me, he whispered. She says she always knew something was wrong, but now she knows for sure, Emma finished. Now everyone knows for sure. I walked to our wedding photo, the last one still hanging on the wall. You know what the worst part is? It's not losing what we had. It's realizing we never really had it at all. Every smile in these photos, every happy moment, it was all just a cover for your lies. I took down the wedding photo and placed it face down on the table. So here's what happens next. I've already filed for divorce. Emma has too. The evidence is overwhelming, so don't bother fighting it. Your lawyers will be getting copies of everything tomorrow. Tom, please, Sarah tried one last time. We can try to what? Fix this? Save something? I gestured around the room. Look around, Sarah. Look at what's left. There's nothing here to save anymore. Just wreckage. And that's what you get to live with now. Both of you. The grandfather clock struck 2, its chimes echoing through our fractured world. Outside, the first hints of dawn were starting to lighten the sky. A new day was coming, and with it, the full weight of consequences would begin to fall. 6 weeks after the party, I sat in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. Outside, autumn was painting the trees in shades of red and gold, nature's reminder that endings could be beautiful too. Sarah hadn't contested anything. How could she? The evidence was overwhelming, and her lawyer had advised her that fighting would only drag more details into public record. She'd moved in with her sister temporarily, though I heard Rachel was already tiring of hosting the family pariah. Greg and Emma's divorce had been finalized a week earlier. He'd lost his job, of course. Companies tend to frown on executives who expense their affairs. Last I heard, he'd taken a position several steps down at a firm in another state, starting over at 45 with alimony payments and a ruined reputation. Emma seemed to be doing better, throwing herself into her art gallery and the surprising support network that had emerged from the wreckage. That's everything, my lawyer said, gathering the papers. You're officially divorced, the house is yours, the business is yours, and she waives any claim to future earnings. I nodded, feeling strangely empty, not sad, not triumphant, just done. What happens now? Now? He smiled. Now you live your life, though I'd advise waiting a bit before dating. Let the dust settle first. Dating. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. I'd been too focused on surviving, on making it through each day as my carefully built life had crumbled around me. But he was right. There would be a now to deal with. I drove to my auto shop where business was actually up. Turns out, being the wronged husband had earned me a lot of sympathy customers. The betrayed spouse gets the support, while the cheaters get the cold shoulders. Small-town justice at its finest. Mike was waiting in my office, a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses on my desk. "Figured you could use this today." "You figured right." I settled into my chair, letting him pour. "It's done, signed and filed." "How do you feel?" I considered the question, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "Like I just finished a marathon I never wanted to run. Exhausted, relieved, kind of numb." "Any regrets?" "About how you handled it? The public exposure? The nuclear option?" I shook my head. "Number. They deserve to face real consequences, not just private pain, but public accountability. They needed to lose the things they valued: reputation, status, social standing." Mike nodded. "Sarah's mom called me yesterday, wanted to know how you were doing. They still consider you family, you know." "That's the thing about betrayal," I said. "It doesn't just destroy the relationship, it destroys the entire social fabric around it. Friends have to choose sides, families get torn, communities fracture." "But they heal," Mike pointed out. "Look at you. 6 weeks ago you thought your world was ending. Now you're running a successful business, making plans, moving forward." He was right. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a kind of quiet strength. I'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and I'd done it on my terms. No quiet divorce, no secret shame, no letting them maintain their perfect facades while I carried the pain alone. "You know what I learned from all this?" I said, pouring us each another drink. "Trust isn't just about love. It's about respect, about seeing someone's true character. Sarah and Greg, they didn't just betray their spouses, they betrayed themselves, their own integrity." "Pretty philosophical for a mechanic," Mike grinned. "Yeah, well, betrayal has a way of making you think deep thoughts." I raised my glass. "To new beginnings and to karma, which sometimes needs a little help from a voice message and a really good sound system." Later that night, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. My phone buzzed. Another message from a concerned friend checking in. 6 weeks ago, a message like that had destroyed my world. Now it just reminded me that I wasn't alone. The autumn wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the last traces of summer. Somewhere across town, Sarah was living with the consequences of her choices. Somewhere in another state, Greg was starting over with a tarnished name, and here I was on my porch watching the seasons change. I didn't feel like a victor or a victim. I felt like someone who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger. Different, scarred maybe, but stronger. The truth had cost me my marriage, but it had given me something more valuable: self-respect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to rebuild. But for now, I sat in the gathering dusk, at peace with the ending I'd chosen. Sometimes, I realized, the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's surviving it with your dignity intact.